Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is going to be episode number 54. We're continuing on in our series here looking at America's Secret Beginnings. We're on disc number 2, which is Riddles and Stone. And we're just about done with that one. We've done 2 parts of that one, so this will be the third. We're just past the 2-hour mark. We're at 2 hours, 1 minute, and 56 seconds. And so we got about 50 minutes or so left. So Lord willing, we should be able to get through that here tonight. But yeah, as always, if you're just catching this randomly, I highly recommend you go back and watch these in order. They're done with a purpose in mind, to build a foundation of this worldview step by step. That's why it's called developing. We're building it brick by brick. We started with the gospel. You must have a biblical understanding in order to grasp what's really going on in the world. You have to have the foundation of faith in Jesus Christ. These are spiritual matters we're looking into. You have to have spiritual ears to hear and spiritual eyes to see. And so you have to have spirit life in you. You must be born again, because in Adam, that is all of humanity, is born spiritually dead, which is why we need to be resurrected by Jesus Christ in his spirit. We need to be born again. We need to be given new life, life in Christ. And once that's done, and you have a proper biblical understanding, you understand things from a biblical perspective, then you can take a look at the world events. You can take a look at the things our politicians and corporate CEOs and media moguls, you can look at their actions and their words, and you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. You develop the concept. You understand that this world is currently governed by Satan. He's called the prince of the power of the air. Jesus referred to him as the god of this world, the prince of darkness. He's in control for the time being, and he gives the kingdoms to whom he wishes. That is, he gives authority, he gives power to those that he wishes, and he gives that to those who worship him. Those and that's why it makes sense that we find high-level occultists involved in positions of power. They've achieved the level of Luciferianism. They've sold their souls, so to speak. They've declared allegiance to the camp of the devil, whom they'll refer to as Lucifer. And they're deceived. They believe that Lucifer is the good guy, that he's offering freedom of will, that you can, or freedom of choice, that you can do whatever you want. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the laws, the satanic credo. And so the idea is we can be debauched. We can do our sexual perversions. We can do drugs. We can lie and cheat and steal to get possessions and power without feeling bad about it. So that's the whole philosophy that undergirds this, and it's perpetuated on society first through evolution. Discrediting a creator God discredits moral right and wrong. If there is no creator God, then there is nobody to be held accountable to. We can do whatever we want. So we looked at that in part 2. The gospel was part 1. The evolution was part 2. And now we're looking at the American Empire, because I personally believe that the American Empire is the muscle, the might, the financial power, the military power being used to create what the politicians call the New World Order, which the Bible calls the beast system. The Antichrist kingdom, so to speak, the last worldwide government power that's going to exist before Christ comes back, the Luciferian satanic world government that will exist before Jesus returns and wipes it out. And so according to the Bible, that must occur. And then we look at society and we hear politicians calling for a new world order, politicians involved in Luciferianism. We see a demoralizing of society. We see all these events occurring that are pushing us towards this new world order, this beast system. And I believe that America is the driving force of that. America is used as the power to create this world system. And I think that's been going on for a long time. I think we're in the last stages of that. And through this first series, we're looking at in the American Empire section of our study, we're seeing how America has an occult foundation, that the occultists believed that America would be used for these purposes. The occultists believed that America was the new Atlantis that would bring in this utopia, this Luciferian utopia that would create this world system. And so we're finding that through Francis Bacon and Benjamin Franklin and so on and so forth, the foundations of this occultism were laid. And in the second video that we've been looking at here, we're seeing the symbols of that all over society. Occultists believe in numerology and symbology. They believe that these things have power, that the right symbols, the right numbers, the right timing opens up communication with what they would call fourth dimensional beings, or angels, or ascended masters, or whatever you would want to call it. We know from a biblical perspective they're communicating with demons, principalities and powers, satanic forces that are giving them information to build this New World Order system. And they believe that if they have the right spot on Earth, the right symbols, the right timing, it increases the capability to hear from these demonic forces. It increases their ability to gain the spiritual power, to gain this mystical power to move forward. And so we've been looking at how America is full of these occult symbols. From the national monument, which is a phalanx, an Egyptian symbol of Ra, the sun god, to the Grecian type temples in Washington D.C., to the alignment with the stars, the old occult saying, "As above, so below." As it's done in heaven, we have to do it here. So if the stars are aligned a certain way, we have to build in alignment with those stars. The dates that are used, they do things on symbolic dates. So we've just been learning about all this stuff and seeing how this nation is really, if this nation is supposedly a Christian nation, then why is the capital of this nation engulfed in paganism, in occult heathenism, with pagan symbols, not Christian symbols? Why is Washington, D.C., the very layout of Washington, D.C., with the streets in a satanic star, with the point on Washington, D.C., with the square and compass of Freemasonry built with the national capital, with the reflective lakes in front of monuments for the as above, so below principle. Just seeing all that stuff, we've been going through all that, and that's where we left off, and that's where we're going to pick up here in this last part. So as always, I appreciate you guys watching with me, and without further ado, let's just jump into it. All right, let's go.
Meanwhile, the day before, on October 12th of 1792, was the first celebration of Columbus Day in America, and supposedly commemorates how Christopher Columbus sailed for 33 days before he made his first landfall in the New World.
33 is one of those numbers.
A statue honoring Christopher Columbus is found outside Union Station in Washington, D.C. The Columbus Monument declares that it was the faith and courage of Christopher Columbus that gave to mankind a new world. Yet for years, researchers have wondered why American historians have given such credit to Columbus when there were others who had reached the New World earlier.
Columbus in 1492 only got as far as the Caribbean islands.
Even the sealing of the state capitol acknowledges the coming of the Vikings. Historians argue that Leif Erikson made it to the New World some 500 years before Columbus.
You do have history. You just don't recognize it.
Or could it be that the recognition is intended to represent something else? After all, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, he did so with sails bearing a red cross on a white background, the symbol of the Knights Templar. These same ships are found painted on the interior ceiling of the U.S. Capitol. When they were arrested, the Templars were accused of devil worship.
Why? Like, think about that. Why? Like, here we are in 2021. Like, it's acknowledged that Columbus didn't discover America. He landed in the Caribbean, and the Norse, the people from Scandinavia, the Vikings, were here at least 500 years before. Plus, there's other people that had been here. Like, he didn't discover anything. We know that now. That's recognized. Yet the textbooks still teach it. Yet history still teaches it. Yet museums and monuments still teach it. Why? There's still a holiday. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense at all. That we're just celebrating a myth, a lie. Like, why is that still perpetuated? And this makes sense. You know, he sailed under the Knights Templar symbols, Gnostic occultism. Columbus, the name is a variation of Columbia, which is I think it's the Babylonian, or one of the Gnostic religions. It's the goddess of freedom or liberty. It's do what thou wilt, you know, that type mentality. So it makes sense from the occult perspective, but from a societal perspective, it's like, why do we still buy into that? Everybody knows it ain't true, but yet we still promote and celebrate it.
A charge that has been a point of controversy to this day.
Many hundreds of knights were captured, they were tortured, and that makes a lot of their confessions rather suspect. However, I think the old saying is, where there's smoke, there's fire. And it is interesting that in England, the Templar Knights were not tortured. They were interrogated, but they weren't tortured because that was against the law in England. And some things do emerge. One is that they do seem to have been required as part of their ordeal, their initiatic ordeal, if you will, to trample on the cross and spit on the cross. Also, they were alleged to have worshipped this god Baphomet, and which is either described as a three-headed deity, or as a skull, or as a goat-headed being. And those things, I think, were probably true.
Well,
I don't know if they're going to get into Baphomet. We will as we go further down the road. It's one of the more popular names in the occult circles for Satan. It's where the star of Satan, the goat of Mendes, the goat head in the 5-point star, which, if you look at a Dodge, that's that same symbol. They claim, it's a ram, but it's a goat's head in a 5-point, an upside-down pentagram. It's a satanic star. I'm sure you've seen it in movies, different rock albums. They use that upside-down 5-pointed star with the goat head. That's Baphomet. Baphomet is also, if you've ever seen the symbol, it's like a goat-headed figure with female breasts, but like a male body. So like a transvestite, so to speak, going like this, up and down, the as above, so below. I think he's got the staff of Hermes, which is the staff with the snake, which our medical community uses as a symbol. I don't remember if the staff's in his hand or not, but Baphomet is a very dark occultic symbol that represents Satan. So this organization had to worship, or they did worship Satan. They spit upon the cross, yet they were commissioned by Rome, by the Roman Catholic institution, because Rome is the head of the beast system, which again we'll learn further down the road. But
mysteries abound concerning the relationship of the Templars to Masonry. The connection was clearly made by Albert Pike.
We'll get into Baphomet a lot as we go on. We'll learn
In front of the Masonic House of the Temple are two 17-ton sphinxes, cut from single blocks of stone. One representing wisdom, with its eyes half closed, as if in contemplation, while the other represents power, with its eyes wide open. These two chief elements are said to represent Plato's ideal balance for the perfected man.
The man who has wisdom and the man who has power.
To the Scottish Rite, Albert Pike seems to represent such a man, as he is a central focus of the temple itself. A bust of Pike is featured at the top of a stone altar in the main hall. Next to it are Pike's own words: "What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and the world remains and is immortal." But exactly what immortal works Pike did for others and the world remains an issue of constant debate among critics of Masonry.
Albert Pike is a favorite whipping boy of conspiracists.
Like the Templars who came before him, Pike's real beliefs are often questioned, and with him, the beliefs of Masonry.
Albert Pike was a Luciferian. Literally, Luciferianism is the core, the center core of Freemasonry.
Pike's body is buried inside the temple itself, with this stained glass memoriam, next to a bust of his likeness.
And they revered him so much that they actually dug him up and buried him in a wall underground. And you go into the house of the temple, and there's an actual room dedicated to Albert Pike.
The Albert Pike room is located in the lower level and is filled with Pike's many books, a number of portraits and photographs, the pipes, memorabilia, and even the death mask of the man thought by many to be America's most important and notorious Freemason. In his lifetime, Pike would have seen the completion of the U.S. Capitol and the Washington Monument. He lived much of his life in Washington, D.C., and devoted himself to the promotion of Freemasonry. Indeed, some have argued that Pike's controversial form of Masonry was the result of a radical struggle that occurred during the years just after the American Revolution. But how did this struggle come about, and what was its purpose? More importantly, could this influence have somehow impacted the design for Washington, D.C., and with it, the ultimate destiny of America? The answer to these questions may be found by examining a group that today has much to do with Washington, D.C., one that is thought by some to be the most mysterious and dangerous secret society in the world.
General William Huntington Russell was at a university in Germany, studied the ways of a secret society that is sometimes spelled S-C-U-L-L, asked permission to transfer it to North America, and he did. And that is the beginning of Skull and Bones.
Some 50 years earlier, during the time of the American Revolution, Germany had been the home of a secret order that many claim would be responsible for all the wars and conspiracies of the next 200 years. Could William Russell have become involved with a remnant of this German society?
He also is on record observing that American Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism had drifted from their European origins and roots. And as a drift, they were losing sight of the secrets or of the mandate, the purpose, and the protocols of their existence. So he formed Skull and Bones to reconcile these arcane orders with the mainstream European movement.
During this era, the mainstream European movement, especially among secret societies, was on fire with a concept of revolution, which involved overturning old systems of government, monarchies, and the influence of organized religion in particular. In the birth of this revolutionary philosophy, Germany played a key role. In his book, Fire in the Minds of Men, James H. Billington, the Librarian of Congress, writes that the revolutionary ideology of the 18th and 19th centuries was shaped not so much by the rationalism of the French Enlightenment, as is generally believed, but by the occultism and pro-romanticism of Germany. He goes on to say that this ideology continued through the reign of men like Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. Billington writes of what he calls the Pythagorean passion of the early revolutionaries, a fascination with the ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras.
It's interesting they call it fire in the minds of men. It's this spark of light, spark of wisdom, but it's earthly sensual wisdom, as the Bible calls it. It's occultism, Gnosticism. But the devil promised that, remember, in the garden. So the whole system stems from that. When the devil told Eve to eat from the tree and you will know good and evil and you can become like God. So the knowledge aspect of it. And it's interesting that this knowledge, Lucifer is called the light bearer. That's what the name Lucifer means, the bearer of light. It's of artificial light. It's not the light of Jesus Christ. It's not the pure godly light. It's the light of fire in the minds of men. It's eternal fire, damnation, that springs forth rebellion, to revolt against a government, to rebel in violence is to go against the edicts of God. God commands us in Romans 13 to be subject to governments. So to rebel against the king in anarchy or violence or revolution is sin. So it's interesting that's how they're planning on building the New World Order, through a series of revolutions to overthrow governments. It's order out of chaos, which again is why they use the symbol of the phoenix rising from the ashes. They want to destroy what currently exists: morality, family, God, order, and then out of that they'll build their New World Order system, their Luciferian system. So fire in the minds of men, it's this, they're illuminated with this false light that causes them to rebel. Satan is the ultimate rebel, to rebel against God again, and that's what Psalms 2 talks about. The kings and rulers of the earth plot and plan rebellion against God, to overthrow God.
According to tradition, Pythagoras was driven from Greece to southern Italy, where he allegedly founded a religious and philosophical brotherhood to transform society. Pythagorean philosophy dominated the signs and symbols revolutionaries used to define their movement. Billington writes that occultists became politicians and made special use of the two most important Pythagorean geometric symbols, the circle and the triangle, in dramatizing their challenge to establish power. In Germany, the leading revolutionary was a Bavarian law professor named Adam Weishaupt, who founded a secret society called the Illuminati. Billington writes that Weishaupt's final blueprint for politicized Illuminism, written during the first year of the French Revolution, was entitled Pythagoras. Pythagorean geometry plays an important role in the design for Washington, D.C. The entire layout of the city is based around Federal Triangle, a right triangle which represents the Pythagorean theorem. Could this have been the influence of Adam Weishaupt and the revolutionary faith of the Illuminati?
It's interesting too, and I've mentioned this before, that there seems to be two pieces to the New World Order triangle working together, but like secretly opposed to one another. There's the religious branch, which is headed by Roman Catholicism and the Jesuits, and then there's this military, industrial, financial branch, political branch, headed by what we would call the 13 families of the Illuminati. And they seem to be vying for control, but this system, Weishaupt borrowed training from the Jesuits. He took so the Jesuits had this in place, but under the auspices of religion, trying to establish popery as the head of this. So they had this system of subterfuge and conspiracy. They had this developed. Weishaupt took that and like made it secular, so to speak. Made it more about the political, financial, industrial, military arm. And so now you have these two competing branches. And I believe that's what Revelation talks about at the end of Revelation 17. Revelation 17 very clearly identifies Roman Catholicism, as the woman who rides the beast, the whore of Babylon. And we'll get into this further, but Rome is basically the Babylonian mystery religions with Christian titles. So that's why she's called a whore. She interbred Christianity with Gnosticism, with paganism, and created this abomination of Roman Catholicism. And it says that she sits, and when you read through Revelations 17, it gives I think 10 or so different identifying marks about who this woman is. And it's very, very, it's the most crystal clear chapter in Revelation, other than chapters 19 through 21. A lot of Revelation is really hard to understand what's being said, but Revelation 17 is crystal clear. Revelation 19 through 21 is even more clear. But 17 identifies Rome as the woman who rides the beast. And the beast is the worldwide system, the New World Order. The beast, because Daniel identifies a beast as a government. Daniel had visions of 4 beasts, and he identified them as the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire, and the Roman Empire. So when he saw a beast in his vision, it represented a world government, or an empire. And he wrote this during Babylon, so this was way before those other 3. That's what happened, and there's only been 4 world empires: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. It's an amazing prophecy that he saw. But then John sees another beast, a worldwide beast, in chapter 13 that causes the whole world, every tribe, tongue, and nation, to worship it and to take a mark in their hand or in their forehead, without which they'll be cut off from the financial sector. You won't be able to buy or sell. So it's a worldwide beast, a worldwide government, a new world order. That's what these people are trying to build. And but the woman sits on top of the beast. And the way I take that to mean a rider of a beast controls, directs, and guides the beast. And so I believe the Roman Empire, not the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic institution is controlling and directing and guiding this New World Order system. But at the end of Revelation 17, it says that the 10 kings that come, which implies that this New World Order system is going to be divided into 10 kingdoms, 10 sub-kingdoms. Like we have the United States and then 50 individual states within the United States. So we'll have a world empire, and within that world empire, 10 sectors with governors, under the headship of the ruler. But these 10 governors are going to turn against the woman who rides the beast. So it seems like they're both building this New World Order system, and currently popery sits at the head of it. But once it's formed, this secular branch of it is going to attack the religious branch and overtake it. At least that's what I get when you read Revelation 17. Was that the point I wanted to make? I forget what they were even talking about now. I talked so long, but yeah, I apologize if I went off topic there.
And if so, in what other ways could this mysterious and highly controversial group have impacted America?
The Illuminati was an organization created in Bavaria. A Freemason named Adam Weishaupt created the Illuminati as an inner circle of Freemasons. And he was very definitely taken by the period of the Enlightenment. He saw liberal democracy and liberal government, not liberal in the sense that we use it today in political talk, but liberal in the sense of giving rights and freedoms to the citizen as an important way to improve the world. And his plan was to create this inner circle of Masons called the Illuminati. That means the enlightened ones. And that this inner circle of Freemasons would then spread out among Masonic lodges, and then the Masons in turn would see to it that their members were put in prominent positions in government, and that then the Illuminati's influence would enable the liberal democratic principles of the Enlightenment to be spread throughout the world.
It had three ideals: separation of church and state, controls on the power of the state, and the emancipation of women. Three planks in their platform, if you will. Now, one could say that the Bavarian Illuminati won, because that, in effect, defines Western society.
Because the Illuminati plan to change the world in many ways came to pass, some believe the order functioned through the revolutionary movements of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. The cry for revolution around the world seems to have impacted all the countries of Europe and spread beyond to Russia, China, North Korea, and Cuba. But most controversial is the society's influence in America, something hinted at in the very date in which the Illuminati in Germany was founded.
I think they were supposedly formed in 1776, the same year of the Declaration of Independence.
And the Illuminati was established as an organization. You know, he says, no longer are we going to take the orders of the monarchs in 1776. Now that's a pretty important date, isn't it?
Now, you made reference to 1776 and the Illuminati. Can you draw a line?
I do associate the two because the language was so symbolic. It's too direct and too precise not to know that these people who envisioned such a new world were actually combined in the underground secret societies.
And we're going to learn a lot about the symbols on the dollar bill, but that one right there is pretty important. So the date on the pyramid, what does an Egyptian pyramid have to do with America, is 1776. Easy for them to give an exoteric meaning, saying, oh, it's the Declaration of Independence. But the esoteric meaning behind it is the formation of the Illuminati, the foundation block of the New World Order pyramid, and the all-seeing eye of Horus, the Luciferian system, being the top of that. And the words annuit coptis novus ordo seclorum, meaning he looks on with favor, new world order, or new order of the ages. Novus, new ordo, seclorum being secular or world or ages. So new world order, he looks on with favor, and you got that. The 13 levels of the pyramid representing the 13 levels of Illuminati, or the 13 families of Illuminati. So the foundation being the Illuminati organization, the foundation of the American Empire, the 13 families, or the 13 degrees, or whatever you want to call it, and then the all-seeing eye at the top. And I think that it's interesting that the reason it hovers, it's not connected to the pyramid, is because it's not yet complete. So they knew that they were building the New World Order starting in 1776, but it wasn't yet complete. I think we're at a point in time where the world is ready for that. I think if you look at just the Illuminati families are involved in banking, and we'll get into that a lot later. A lot of the world banks, a lot of the central banks are controlled and owned by the New World Order Illuminati families. It's through the money that they control different organizations. And when you look at the influence that world banks have, they have control over almost the entire world. As far as I know, I think there's only 3 countries. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there's only 3 countries remaining that are not under control of the world banks. And here's how you know what they are. Which 3 nations does the American Empire continually present as a threat? as countries that need to be conquered and dealt with. North Korea, Iran, Cuba. I think those are the only three. And so back during the George Bush administration after 9/11, when he came out and said there's an axis of evil that we need to deal with, and I think there was 7 countries involved, and it was probably, I can't remember, Libya, Afghanistan, maybe Iraq was on there. I think it had to have been Iraq, and Syria maybe, and then North Korea, Iran, and Cuba. And somebody can correct me on if I got those wrong as well. But because they used 9/11 as a pretext to go to war, we conquered 4 of those remaining 7. So now there's only 3. Those 4 are now under control of the New World Order empire. And that's why I say America's used as the muscle to go forth and conquer the world for the Illuminati, to bring them under subjection to these world banks. And so you look, and the whole world is now under sway of these banks, except for the 3, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba, I believe. Venezuela, I think, was another one, but they just recently conquered Venezuela. Venezuela collapsed. And so now it's like these other 3, that's why our government and media continually portray them as enemies and dangers. They're getting the population conditioned to the idea that eventually we're going to have to go to war and take them over, so that when we do, it's justified in the minds of the people. But what they're really doing is taking out those 3 last strongholds to bring the entire world under subjection of the Illuminati. And then the New World Order is formed. Then everything belongs to the Illuminati, belongs to the world banks. Through that system, they have their control grid. And so it's interesting, like at some point in time, we're going to war with Iran and North Korea. Or one of the ways they do it is through overthrows, government overthrows. The CIA will go into a country, will stir up the population to revolution against the hierarchy or whatever sort of authorities in power there, and then they'll use that nation's people and anger. They'll use propaganda to say we're mistreated and all that, to get the people angry, to revolt against the authority, to conquer the authority, and then America will put in place a new president or a new authority power that's under subjection to the New World Order. That's part of the system, and so they can conquer a country through that subtle spy games type stuff, through that subterfuge. That's twice I've used that word, and I'm not even sure if I'm using it correct, so I'm going to stop. But they use those secretive means to conquer a country instead of going to war. So it could be they do that in Iran. I mean, you hear stories every once in a while about the Iranian people getting angry and stirred up and moving towards revolution. That's probably most definitely the CIA in there stirring up the populace. North Korea, a little bit different. I would suggest that we probably will end up going to war with them to conquer them. And then Cuba seems, I don't understand why they haven't conquered Cuba yet. That part is a mystery to me. It seems like Cuba would be pretty easy. Maybe they have Cuba already. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. So again, I'm rambling here, but that pyramid on the back of the dollar bill tells this story of the New World Order. And I think we've got a DVD here by Doc Marquis that we're going to watch later on. That the whole 3 hours is dedicated to the symbols on the dollar bill. There's a lot to be told there. So.
Of Europe.
Fire was an important symbol to the revolutionaries, who were determined to destroy the old world in preparation for the new. As one of them declared, with a match, one does not lift up the world, one burns it. Weissaup's Bavarian Illuminati sparked the flame of the revolutionary faith, but some researchers believe that at some point their flame was put out.
They lasted about 10 years. Now, what lasted for centuries after them was the rumor and reputation that there is a secret inner circle of Freemasons that are plotting to take over the world. John Robison in Scotland wrote a book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, where he talks about how the Illuminati are trying to take over Masonic lodges, and Masonic lodges are trying to take over the world.
But the American lodges, by and large, externally, and we know, did not accept that because it wasn't needed. However, it doesn't mean that there weren't lodges within the United States that did. You had to have had some Freemasons that were members of the Illuminati, but were they in control of any lodges? Don't think so, because it would be against the law. In the lower levels, they could talk all they wanted about it, but to get together as a group, as a function, as Freemasons, they couldn't.
There was an Illuminati scare. How frightening is this? We've always known there was a Masonic lodge down the street. Could they be infiltrated by the Illuminati? Are they secretly trying to take over our government? All of this is foolishness. The Illuminati went out of business after about 10 years. They never spread beyond, much beyond Bavaria, certainly never to the United States.
It seems logical to some that Weissaup's organization was disbanded by 1786 after it had been discovered and outlawed by the Bavarian government the year before. But others point to a letter written by George Washington on October 24th, 1798, 12 years after the Illuminati had supposedly ceased to function. Writing to the Reverend G.W. Schneider, Washington acknowledged the presence of Illuminati doctrines at work in America. The Reverend Schneider had sent Washington a copy of the book, Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, by Professor John Robeson, saying that his book gives a full account of a society of Freemasons that distinguishes itself by the name of Illuminati, whose plan is to overturn all government and all religion. When Washington responded, he said, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am." We asked Dr. Morris to comment on the letter, but he told us he was unaware of it. The letter itself may be found among the George Washington papers at the Library of Congress. In this letter, Washington associates the Illuminati with the Jacobins, the radical French group that launched the French Revolution. Many writers and historians over the last 2 centuries have concluded that the power behind the Jacobins was in fact the Illuminati. It is well documented that some of the Jacobins came to America and here tried to stir up a second American Revolution through groups known as the Democratic Clubs. The Jacobins, who by this time had overthrown King Louis, sent their ambassador, Edmond Genet, to America to build support for the French Revolution. American leaders like Washington wanted to keep the country neutral, but Genet was determined to bring her into the fray, even if it meant overthrowing the new American government. In a letter from John Adams to Thomas Jefferson, Adams wrote, "You certainly never felt the terrorism excited by Genet in 1793, when 10,000 people in the streets of Philadelphia, day after day, threatened to drag Washington out of his house and effect a revolution in the government, or compel it to declare war in favor of the French Revolution." Many researchers believe the French Revolution is the key to understanding the presence of the Illuminati in America. Because the revolution in France had been so reckless and bloody, most of America's leaders were appalled by it, except for one, Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson spent 5 years as the American minister to France and was an ardent supporter of the French Revolution during the planning stages. He even allowed his residence to be used as a meeting place for the rebels, who were led by the Marquis de Lafayette. When Jefferson heard about the bloodshed in France during the Reign of Terror, he said that rather than see the revolution fail, I would have seen half the earth desolated. Were there but an Adam and Eve left in every country, left free, it would be better than as it now is. Jefferson predicted that the ball of liberty would roll around the globe. The hand rolling this ball would be, undoubtedly, the clenched fist of revolution. For many researchers, the presence of the all-seeing eye floating above an unfinished pyramid stands as clearest proof of the Illuminati at work in America.
Is the Illuminati to be defined as Freemasons and Rosicrucians and other secret society members? If that's the case, then yes, I believe the symbol on the dollar bill, the truncated pyramid, is directly related to the Illuminati.
Dr. James Billington, the Librarian of Congress, is pictured here beside First Lady Laura Bush. His relationship with President Bush is unknown, but we are given cause to wonder at it. According to Dr. Billington, it was the Bavarian Illuminati that put the fire in the minds of men and compelled them toward a global revolution to change the world. Is it possible that this philosophy is at work in America today?
By our efforts, we have lit a fire as well, a fire in the minds of men. It warms those who feel its power. It burns those who fight its progress. And one day, this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of our world.
Could President Bush have been implying what it seems? Is America currently being driven by the same revolutionary fire that inspired the Bavarian Illuminati? Bush is often said to be a fundamentalist Christian, but some of his critics claim his views are more ecumenical. As with Freemasonry, Bush believes in other routes to finding God.
We all worship the same God, Christian and Muslim. I think we do. We have different routes of getting to the Almighty. Do Christians and non-Christians, do Muslims go to heaven, in your mind? Yes, they do. We have different routes of getting there.
Is Bush's real belief a clue to understanding his membership in Skull and Bones? And is Skull and Bones, the elite secret society, somehow related to a modern form of the Illuminati?
The Illuminati was a secret society. It existed in Europe, started in 1776. It infiltrated the upper echelons of Masonry, and that is how it has managed to exist since that time.
A chief piece of evidence is the radical presence of Citizen Genet. Genet is said to be responsible for the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794.
And George Washington actually sent an army to put down this revolution that was incited by Citizen Genet, who was the French ambassador to the United States, who was a Jacobin, and the Jacobins were simply a front name for the Illuminati. The Illuminati was here.
In 1798, the same year George Washington wrote his letter to the Reverend Schneider, another Reverend, Jedediah Morse, gave a speech in which he claimed that the Illuminati had its emissaries at work in America. Morse also associated the Illuminati with the French Jacobins. Among the chief icons of the Jacobins was the red cap worn by the French revolutionaries, known as the Phrygian cap, or the Cap of Liberty. Easily recognized as a cap that, when worn, was often pulled forward, though sometimes to the side. The cap was not only worn by the French rebels, but was often shown symbolically at the end of a staff or upon the head of their goddess of liberty, Mary Anne, as in this famous painting that glorifies the French Revolution. This same Phrygian cap is found among the great seals of a number of U.S. states, on the official seal of the U.S. Army, and on several figures of liberty inside the Capitol building. But its place of greatest prominence seems to be in the Library of Congress, where the Phrygian cap is carved at the top of all the circular window frames and panels in the library. The Phrygian cap dates back to ancient Rome and was said to be worn by slaves who had obtained their freedom, and as such became a symbol of liberty. The chief god worshipped at that time was Mithras, who is seen in many images and sculptures wearing this headpiece. Like the gods Baal and the Egyptian Horus, Mithras was a dying god who was later resurrected. In the pantheon of pagan gods, Mithras occupies the place of the Masonic Christ. The Phrygian cap is also associated with the mythical figure of Ganymede, often portrayed as a handsome young man wearing this cap of liberty. Because of his beauty, Ganymede was carried away by Zeus in the form of an eagle and made the cupbearer of the gods. In time, Zeus gave him a place in the heavens, where he became the constellation Aquarius. Throughout the 20th century, esoteric teachers have taught that mankind is entering into the Age of Aquarius, also called the New Age. In fact, Freemasonry's premier publication, the Scottish Rite Journal, was once called the New Age magazine. The Phrygian caps are also seen in this image of the ancient Magi, who followed the star at the birth of Christ. Freemasonry teaches that this is where the Eastern Star gets its name.
The use of that is actually deceptive, because if you think about it, the three wise men were in the east. They were probably Persian, and they were looking west and saw the star in Bethlehem. So what that passage means is we have seen his star while we were in the east and looking west. That only makes sense geographically.
Nevertheless, esoterics have long believed that the star looked upon by the Magi was in fact Sirius, the blazing star that brings light from the east.
It is about a much more ancient connection to the Magi, to, we three kings of Orient are bearing gifts who traveled so far. Those Magi are Zoroastrian.
Yet not everyone accepts that the Magi were originally followers of Zoroaster. Many Bible scholars believe the Magi were Persians, who were influenced by the writings of the Old Testament prophet Daniel,
Amen.
who lived in that region during the time of Nebuchadnezzar the Great.
Also, because in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel prophesied about the anointing of the Messiah, the coming of the Messiah. And Daniel chapter 9, when you study that out, if you go on my YouTube channel, I've got a couple videos about that. It's one of the most amazing prophecies. He gives a very specific date to when Jesus would come, when the Messiah would come, and how we would recognize the Messiah. And Jesus fulfilled that to the exact year. So it's pretty stunning. But Daniel was considered a wise man. He was a government official. So it only makes sense that he would have taught these things to others that would have then passed that down through the centuries. So that's where the wise men would have came from the school of Daniel, from that lineage. So that at that particular time when Jesus was born, they would have known, hey, we're close to this time that Daniel talked about, and they would have been looking for a sign. And then when they saw that star, they would have said, that's it, the Messiah has been born. We know that's him, so it makes sense. Also, just on a side note, they always say 3 wise men. The Bible doesn't say there were 3 wise men. They brought 3 gifts. It just says wise men from the east. There could have been a bunch of them. There could have been a group of 40 wise men, who knows. They brought 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which are also symbolic. Gold representing kingship. Jesus is the King of Kings. Frankincense being the incense that a priest would burn, and Jesus is the high priest. And myrrh being a burial, an embalming thing, showing that he would die for us. So the gold, frankincense, and myrrh was a prophetic symbol of his kingship, priesthood, and death. But it doesn't say there were 3 wise men. So that's something that's perpetuated through myth, through story. It's like when people say Adam and Eve ate the apple from the tree. The Bible doesn't say it was an apple. It says they ate fruit. Or when we celebrate Jesus' birth on December 25th, the Bible doesn't mention when Jesus was born. So if we stick to strictly Bible and not tradition or mythology, which is what we're supposed to do, scriptures alone are our authority. We can straighten those myths out. Adam and Eve, we don't know what kind of fruit they ate. They ate fruit from a tree. We don't know how many wise men there were. We just know wise men came and brought 3 gifts. We don't know. Also, they wouldn't have come to the stable like we see in Christmas, because it says that Jesus would have been like a toddler when they found him, living in was it Bethlehem where they live in, or I don't remember, but Herod sent to have all the children under the age of 2 killed or whatever, because he knew the dates. He knew, okay, by now this child's going to be about this old. So but then also the birth date, that's something Rome introduced into Christian tradition in order to pacify pagans, because the pagans worshipped Tammuz, the birth of Tammuz, on December 25th. And so they said, well, let's just take that and change it to the birth of Christ. So a lot of the traditions and myths that we get are just mixed paganism, or made up history, or whatever you would call it. It's not biblical. But I believe those wise men were probably students of Daniel, passed out. Like Daniel probably would have set up a knowledge base, leaving his writings and teachings that was passed down generation to generation, so that by the time we come to the birth of Christ, the Magi that were around at that time would have known about Daniel's prophecy and would have been looking for him.
One of the titles given to Daniel was Rab Mag, or Chief of the Magi. In his writings, Daniel was inspired by an angel who gave him a timeline in which to expect the Christ of Israel. Many scholars believe the Magi were in fact following the prophecies of Daniel. In contrast, Freemasons believe they were Zoroastrian mystics, guided by the star Sirius, and hence Sirius came to represent the Masonic concept of the Christ. This image shows the prophet Zoroaster wearing a Phrygian cap. Yet Zoroaster is most often portrayed with a beard, wearing a robe, belted at the waist, with an Eastern head garment. The name Zoroaster is said to mean Radiant One, and is a reference to the light that shines above his head, said to be the light of Sirius. The dog star Sirius is said to be at least one of the origins of the Masonic pentagram, which leads us by far to the most controversial element in the design for Washington, D.C.
There is a pentagram that is produced by the angles of the streets and avenues to the north of the White House.
You see the goat of Mendes appearing, the ears, the entire goat of Mendes, and the inverted 5-pointed star, which is the goat of Mendes, built into the streets of Washington, D.C. No one can have that happen accidentally.
I've heard silly
with its down point on the White House. And in occult magic, the down point, or the point, it can either point up or down. When it's pointed up, it's Wiccan, which is white magic, which they would call good magic, but we know all magic is Luciferian and evil. But when it's pointing up, when it's a 5-pointed star point with the 1 point at the top, and then you have the star like that, the point up here, that's supposedly good magic, and I think it's earth, wind, fire, water, spirit, and so the 5 points, and the spiritual arm pulling down the spiritual energies of the heavens. When it's pointed down, it's supposed to be black magic or dark, evil magic. So when the star is I can't draw an upside down star, but what I'm getting at, when that point is pointed down, that's its point of power, its point of spirit, drawing energies from down below, from the hell realm or whatever. But that power point is on the White House, so that Luciferian energy power is directly centered on the White House, which is pretty interesting. Which again, I think gives some credence to the idea that whoever the leader of this New World Order system is going to be, this beast system, this satanic entity, might come from the White House.
things, but not much. No, there are no satanic plans in the street plans of Washington, D.C.
The presence of a pentagram in the street layout of Washington, D.C. is said to represent the darkest influence of Masonry in America's capital, and is the driving force behind images such as this one, which suggests that all the other buildings and monuments are of satanic origin. As many are aware, the presence of the pentagram is greatly disputed. During the Middle Ages, the pentagram was a symbol of good luck and protection when used by those who practiced magic.
And one of the things they came upon was the idea that if there were such things as demons and spirits, then they should be able to summon them, either just to observe them to prove that they existed, or to control them to whatever purpose they might want to. These people were, I suggest, an early form of experimental scientists as much as they were magicians. They were just trying to see what would happen. And one of the things I decided to do is, if they were going to call up a spirit or a demon in a specific place, they draw a circle, and then they would put pentagrams at the corners as a warding sign to protect them from whatever danger that demon might pose to them.
The inverted pentagram is seen as a highly satanic symbol. Meanwhile, placing a goat's head in the center of it is most often blamed on 19th century French occultist Eliphas Levi,
who arbitrarily decided to say that the pentagram, one point up was a positive good luck, good fortune symbol, and one point down was a negative evil symbol. He provided no citations as to where he got that idea from, and there was nothing historically documented prior to him to suggest that anyone ever thought that was the case.
This is an important issue because Eliphas Levi was arguably the most influential occultist of the 19th and 20th centuries.
He was probably the most powerful sorcerer of the 19th century.
His writings inspired every major occult leader, including Madame H.P. Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, Manly P. Hall, and Albert Pike.
Yes, indeed, Pike does quote Levi in his writings.
Levi's concept of the pentagram was most likely the influence of the 15th century German alchemist Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Agrippa is a well-known figure in occult circles and is even mentioned in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as well as J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Agrippa published his books on occult philosophy around 1509. Today, his collection is called the Foundation Book of Western Occultism. In this book, he features an inverted pentagram and calls it the Pentagram of Pythagoras. According to Pythagoras, the inverted pentagram symbolized the 5 chambers of Tartarus, one of the Greek words for hell. But the Pythagoreans believed descending into this underworld led one to a path of higher wisdom. Hence the symbolism of Dante's Inferno, in which Dante descends into hell so that he can later enter into paradise. The Pythagoreans also believed that from this 5-chambered Tartarus came the world's demon, or evil spirit. The German-based Illuminati, with their Pythagorean passion, would have certainly been familiar with this belief, as would the rest of the revolutionary occultists in France, who could very well have influenced Pierre L'Enfant and Thomas Jefferson. First, we must address the main issue, raised by every researcher. Is there really a pentagram in the street layout of the city?
One segment of the pentagram is missing.
I started to look carefully at the maps and draw my lines, and then I find out that, hey, it's not a real 5-pointed star. It doesn't have legs.
And you can draw a pentagram over some of the major streets, but the streets don't actually connect to form a pentagram.
There's absolutely no doubt that a partial pentagram appears in the street designs of Washington. You can look at a satellite photo of Washington, D.C. and see the pentagram. It seems to be symmetric around 16th Street, which is the street that runs into the White House. If you look at the earliest published maps of the District of Columbia, the design that was laid out by Pierre L'Enfant, you can see this partial pentagram. but it is just that, a partial pentagram. Rhode Island Avenue does not connect all the way through to Connecticut. I've always wondered to myself if we Masons are so all-fired powerful that we can have this satanic device put in the streets. How come we weren't smart enough or powerful enough to have it completed? But as I understand the use of the pentagram, it's the fact that it is a complete symbol that gives it its power and force. I've never heard of anything being associated with an uncompleted pentagram.
These assertions would seem to close the argument, except for the fact that the unfinished or broken pentagram is a recognized symbol in the occult. Manly P. Hall writes of the uses of the pentagram in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He says, the pentagram is used extensively in black magic. The star may be broken at one point by not permitting the converging lines to touch. It may be inverted by having 1 point down and 2 up. When used in black magic, the pentagram is called the sign of the cloven hoof, or the footprint of the devil. Of course, Hall wrote these things in the early part of the 20th century. But is there a record of a partial pentagram found during the Revolutionary era? The answer is yes. In fact, it is a record that shows up during the same time that the street design for Washington, D.C. was being laid out by Pierre L'Enfant, and is mentioned in the play Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Goethe published the first edition of Faust in 1790, in which he mentions a partial pentagram in the dialogue between Faust and Mephistopheles, the devil whom he has conjured. Mephistopheles says, "Let me go up. I cannot go away. A little hindrance bids me stay." To which Faust replies, "The pentagram? That's in your way? You son of hell, explain to me, if that stays you, how came you in today?" To which Mephistopheles says, "Observe it closely. It is not well made. One angle on the outer side of it is just a little open, as you see." While Goethe published his first edition of Faust in 1790, it was between 1791 and 1792 that Pierre L'Enfant drew up the initial street design for Washington, D.C. This might all be seen as a mere coincidence, if not for the fact that Johann Wolfgang von Goethe was not only a master mason, but also a famous member of the Bavarian Illuminati. The Builder magazine, a Masonic publication, in September 1923, said of Goethe that it is no wonder that German Freemasons point with pride to his connection with their order. After he became a member in 1780, he accomplished no great work which did not ring in Masonic accord. He completed nothing which did not lead back to a Masonic origin. Meanwhile, Masonic author Michael Bagent writes that Goethe not only depicted a Faust figure, he was himself a Faust figure, an adjunct of his own personal Hermetic quest. But could Goethe's ideas of Hermetic philosophy have influenced the design for Washington, D.C.? And how might an unfinished pentagram reflect the Hermetic principle of as above, so below? Which brings us to what may be the most logical explanation for the unfinished pentagram in Washington, D.C., and one that seems to fit perfectly with the rest of the design for the city, a city which David Oveson calls a city of the stars.
I have seen it suggested that the unfinished nature of the pentagram in Washington, D.C. bears a resemblance to the unfinished pentagram design that is seen in the motion of Venus. Of course, Venus has a lot of retrograde motion because it is between us and the sun. And in relation to the other stars, Venus, of course, moves around a lot, but it in effect draws against the backdrop a nearly complete pentagram.
The cycles of Venus rotating around the Sun happen over an 8-year period, during which Venus hits 5 points in the heavens, which form the outline of a pentagram. The female aspect of Venus is the celestial Virgin, which David Obeson argues was the chief inspiration for aligning Washington, D.C. with the stars.
It would support his theory that there was an intentional astronomical relationship in the layout of the city.
In fact, Obeson mentions this motion of Venus, relating it to the 5-petaled flower, many of which appear throughout Washington, D.C., which represent the path of Venus as shown in this drawing from a well-known book on astronomy from the 18th century. Now, what about the broken pentagram? Most astrologers plot the 8-year course of Venus in relation to the zodiac, and their diagrams look like this. But according to Theosophic author David Pratt, this is not entirely correct. He says that while Venus produces a 5-pointed star, or pentagram, there is a slight irregularity. For the pentagram is not completely closed, there being a difference of 2 days at the top, which could mean that the broken pentagram of Venus might look something like this.
It's so intriguing and just gives more credence to the idea that the ruler of this New World Order system will come out of the White House, because the Venus being the virgin, a virgin birth, the devil mocks God, duplicates the spiritual realities of God in a physical way. I've often thought the scriptures talk about God sitting on a mountain. A pyramid is a man-made physical mockery of the natural mountain. It's a man-made mountain, so to speak. So the devil sits on top of that man-made mountain. And the scriptures often talk about the difference between spirit and flesh. We're born of the spirit. That which is of the flesh is wicked and death. So the devil does things in a fleshly sense. God does things in a spiritual sense. Revelation talks about how the saints of God are marked with the mark of God, the mark of the Spirit. It's a spiritual mark, not a physical mark. So then the devil counterfeits that with the New World Order system with a mark of the beast, an actual physical mark in the hand or in the forehead. But we have the virgin birth. Jesus the Messiah, God the Son, came to earth and was born of a virgin. So the mockery of that would be to use occultism, the virgin birth coming out of Venus or Virgo, and then you have the down point, the power point on the White House. It all makes sense. It's incredible the thought and the study and the wisdom. I'm not going to call it wisdom, it's the knowledge, occultive knowledge that they have, that these occultists possess to know all these things. They study these things, it's important to them. But it's just intriguing that everything lines up, it matches up, it makes sense.
But which conclusion seems most plausible? Is the pentagram merely an accident? Or does it represent some arcane magical ceremony? Or is it simply a reflection of Venus, according to the Hermetic principle, as above, so below?
With symbols, there are always multiple levels, up to 7 different levels of interpretation.
One interpretation of the pentagram is given by the Thelemic order of the Golden Dawn, which says that the pentagram is itself a perfect geometric symbol of the perfected man.
So just to clarify, what he said there, the exoteric meaning given, the dismissive meaning given to the public is, it's just a coincidence. to some adepts, people that are learning these things, they would be told, oh yeah, it's not satanic, it's as above so below, we did it because of Venus, or it represents, you know, the 5 elements or whatever. And then the higher levels are, no, it's a Luciferian pentagram with its PowerPoint on the White House. So it's like this knowledge is power thing. Occultism hides their knowledge until a person earns the degree, the level to attain that knowledge. So there's all these different explanations that are given. So lower level people will just accept, oh yeah, it's just a coincidence. And then the next level up will think, oh yeah, it's just as above so below. And then the next level up, oh, it's the 5 elements or whatever. Oh, and then the highest level, you know, they're told what it really is, the Luciferian system. That's how all the symbols work. If I walk up to somebody and I say, hey, the Dodge symbol is a satanic star, they'll look at you like you're nuts. You know, no, it's called a Dodge Ram. It's a Ram. You know, and the 5 points are on it. That's just coincidental. You know, or if I were to say, hey, Target is a symbol for Ra, the sun god, they would say, no, it's not. It's a target. You know, it's a bullseye. You know, but what bullseye have you ever seen that just has 1 dot? You know, no, that's but to the masses, to the population, it's just a coincidental thing, or it's just named after, you know, Rockstar has the upside down pentagram on it, the Rockstar energy drinks, and people say it's just a star. It's called Rockstar. It's just a star, or Starbucks with the mermaid Babylonian goddess with the Dagon fish miters on either side of her and the 5-point star on her head. You know, you try to explain to somebody that's a satanic symbol, or whatever, it's just a symbol. Or Apple computers using the apple with a bite out of it, the tree of knowledge. You know, all these things, the symbols are told to the masses that it's just a symbol. You know, it's just, you know, the name of the company. It's just something. You know, but people in the know, occultists, know what those symbols really mean, and they know, okay, this is an organization that's with us, that's on our side. They understand that, and the high level ones understand that it's worship of Lucifer, that it's the Luciferian system.
Meanwhile, Eliphas Levi writes that the angels aspire to become men, for the perfect man, the man God, is above even angels. Which brings us to the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. The building itself is surrounded by 72 massive columns. The number 72 is said to represent the most arcane figure in numerology. The reasons for this vary. The heart of man beats 72 times per minute. The sun drops back against the zodiac every 72 years. The pyramid on the dollar bill was designed with 72 stones. 7 plus 2 equals 9, which, in the occult, is the number of finality. And 9 is considered a reverse 6, which is said to be the number of the perfect man. And so it seems no accident that we should find 6 stars above the head of a figure sitting on a throne overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue, the hypotenuse of Federal Triangle. Beneath him on either side are the figures of a male and a female, with himself in between.
He also had, let's back up here.
Beneath him on either side are the figures.
Oh, come on, I missed it again. Here, okay, there. See, I can't point at it. Do you see underneath the eagle's sitting on that thing? It looks like planks of wood bound together with an axe head on it. That's called a fasci. It's a bundle of sticks bound together to make it stronger, and then the axe head, the symbol of like power and destruction or conquering or whatever. It's a symbol of fascism. Why would the symbol of fascism be on an American building? What's worse than that is if you go watch when the president gives like the State of the Union. What building does he do that? In front of Congress. So is he at the state capitol? I think so. But if you look, when he's up at that podium, on either side of him along the back wall are those symbols of fascism. That is terrifying as an American. That, you know, what place does the symbol of fascism have in a free society?
Pennsylvania Avenue, the hypotenuse of Federal Triangle. Beneath him on either side are the figures of a male and a female, with himself in between. Manly Hall wrote about America's assignment with destiny, while FDR spoke of her rendezvous with destiny. Is it any wonder, then, that according to the National Archives, the figure on a throne overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue is named Destiny? Could this be a picture of the Masonic Christ? And how might he differ from the Christ of the Bible? But even now, the face of Christ is changing in the world. In New York, at the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine, we find a mysterious image hovering above the altar where a traditional crucifix would be. There are no nails in his hands and no crown of thorns upon his head. Instead, we find a robed figure, belted at the waist, with a Zoroastrian-looking cap upon his head, rays of light shining behind him. Could this be the Christ of the New Age? But even now, there are those who believe such a figure is about to take his place on the world stage. In 1982, an English painter named Benjamin Creme took out full-page ads in newspapers around the world declaring the Christ is now here. For more than 20 years now, Creme has traveled the world, telling all nations that the Christ, whom he calls Maitreya, is about to appear.
Maitreya is standing by, ready to come into the world at any moment.
We caught up with Mr. Creme in August of 2006, as he had just come from speaking to an independent group at the United Nations. He had this to say to America.
It's the duty of the American people to respond to Maitreya and to accept their destiny.
It was on May 14th, 1982, that Creme held a press conference to announce that the Christ, Maitreya, was ready to emerge. May 14th was also the date of the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. With all the bloodshed and conflict happening in the Middle East, we asked Creme what he thought it might take to bring peace to the region.
I've always said it will take Maitreya to solve it.
Prophecy teachers warn that the current roadmap to peace, followed by President Bush, is really a roadmap to Armageddon. Meanwhile, Creme says the solution is the universal Christ, which he claims is awaited by all religions.
2,600 years ago, Gautama Buddha made a prophecy. It's in one of the sutras. That at this time would come into the world another great teacher, a Buddha like himself, by name Maitreya, who by dint of his extraordinary spiritual stature would galvanize and inspire humanity to create a brilliant golden civilization based, as he put it, on righteousness and truth. Maitreya is the name of Maitreya Buddha. All the religions are awaiting him. The Muslims are awaiting a teacher they call, a prophet they call the Imam Mahdi. The Hindus are awaiting the return of Krishna or Kalki Avatar. Buddhists are awaiting Maitreya Buddha. He is in fact the world teacher for this age, the age of Aquarius, which is beginning now.
But how have Creme's teachings been received by Christians who are awaiting the return of Jesus Christ?
Jesus Christ teaches very clearly, he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me.
Amen.
If we want to try to bring everything together and say, hey, we all worship the same God, well, then we're going to find ourselves offending the one true God.
Many of them believe that what I'm talking about is what they call the Antichrist.
Yep.
Some even think I'm the Antichrist. Many
You're
even
the
think
John the
I'm
Baptist
not the
for
Antichrist,
the
I'm the
Antichrist.
layman for the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Krem is very significant to the New Age movement because he's kind of like the John the Baptist of the New Age movement. He even as John the Baptist was the voice crying in the wilderness that the Messiah had come, and at Jesus' first coming. Krem believes that he's the one who's heralding his second coming. However, it's a New Age Christ. It's not the Jesus Christ of the Bible. And he comes in a way that the New Age Christ or the Antichrist is portrayed to come, not the way Jesus Christ is coming.
You don't know what the Antichrist is.
Jesus said he's coming in the clouds and every eye will see him. So don't be deceived. Nothing else is the Savior. Nothing else is Christ. He warns if somebody says, oh, he's over here or over there. No, that's a liar. It's a deceiver. It's the devil. It is the Antichrist. Jesus is coming on the clouds. The trumpet will sound. The dead in Christ will be raised. We which are alive and remain will be given glorified bodies. And he will descend on the clouds, and every eye will see him. Even they who pierced him, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. Even so, amen, it says in Revelation 1. And then he'll descend and wipe out this Antichrist kingdom, wipe out this beast system, and then establish his kingdom on earth in a physical form. His kingdom exists right now spiritually. We're part of it if we're born again. But he's coming back to establish an earthly kingdom. And he's going to wipe out this beast system. So anybody who says that it's the Christ or here he is or there he is a liar. The trumpet will sound, the mountains will shake, the sky will crack. He's coming back on the clouds and everyone will see him.
The Antichrist is not a man, it's an energy. It's an energy, destructive energy, deliberately released to break down the old order. It's in Revelations of St. John, if you know. The beast 666, the name of the number of a man, is the Antichrist, Nero. The Emperor Nero, it was released through the Emperor Nero to bring about the dissolution of the Roman dispensation to prepare the way for Christendom.
Revelation was
Oddly
written
enough,
after
Krem's
Nero.
teaching is very similar to a doctrine taught in the Christian community called preterism.
Preterism comes from a Latin word that means past.
In a nutshell, preterism teaches that the prophecies from the book of Revelation were fulfilled by 70 AD, a teaching many Christians reject.
It's really a recipe for
Revelation wasn't written until
to set up the
90
church for
something
the
AD.
Antichrist.
Amen.
While many prophecy teachers warn that the coming of an Antichrist is imminent, Benjamin Krem strongly disagrees.
It has been, it has gone, it's done its destructive work and made possible for the Christ himself to return to the world.
Could Benjamin Krem be right? Were all the prophecies concerning the Antichrist fulfilled in the past? And does the world now stand ready to receive the Masonic Christ of the new Aquarian age? And what can this mean for America? Even now, some believe that America's true destiny is to establish the kingdom of God on earth. Could they be right? Is this the key to understanding the secret architecture of Washington, D.C.?
Maitreya himself spoke to me. He said, I myself am coming, sooner than anyone thinks possible. And he will face humanity with a choice. Create justice in the world and build the most brilliant civilization this earth has ever seen. Or perish utterly.
Yeah, we're going to be
That's the choice.
persecuted. I'm excited to get into this next one now. Alright, so that's that. Alright, so that completes Riddles in Stone, disc number 2 of our America's Secret Beginnings series here. Very, very, very good stuff. Like I said, I'm excited to jump into the next one now just because of the spiritual things they were talking about at the end there, and the false Christ, the devil, the Antichrist, the head of the beast system, whatever you want to call him, that Benjamin Krem is announcing. And how he said, we're going to be given a choice, either fall in line with him or die. And that's reality. That's what Jesus told us. The world's going to hate us. We're going to be persecuted. That there's when the beast system comes and they say, take this mark or you're cut off from society. When we refuse the mark, we're going to be hunted and persecuted. Revelation calls it the patience of the saints. It's then that we have to endure and be patient and trust God's providence, knowing we're going to have hardships. We're going to go through hard times. The entire world is going to be thrown into darkness and peril. Perilous times will come, the scriptures say, and we're going to be persecuted and hunted, imprisoned, tortured, killed, martyred. And that's fine, to die is gain. We know where we're going next, but we have to be prepared to endure, be prepared to be cut off from society. And marvelous things are going to be happening all at that same time. While that's occurring, the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, they're going to be revived. They're going to be getting saved. They're going to be getting born again left and right. The natural branches are going to start getting grafted back into the tree. So we'll see a revival there. We'll see many Jews coming to recognize Jesus Christ as the Savior and getting saved. We're also going to see all the plagues that Revelation talks about poured out on the beast kingdom. So while the beast system persecutes us, God's going to persecute the beast system. And so we have to stand strong and endure and stay steadfast. It's exciting on one hand. I'm sure when we see it, it's not going to be exciting. Like the excitement in me, the adrenaline, it's like, yes, that's going to be, we're so close to the coming of the Savior to see all these events coming to pass. But at the same time, it's going to be horrific. It's going to be a terrible time of judgment and darkness. We're going to be protected from the plagues, because when Egypt was plagued, the Jews were protected from those plagues. And that was a foreshadow of the Revelation plagues. So when those Revelation plagues are being poured out on the beast system, we're going to be protected. But we are going to be persecuted by the world. We're going to be hunted down and killed by this beast system. But that's okay. Like I say, it's fine. That's what the Lord told us is going to happen. And we know where we're going afterwards. But this Gentile world is going to be thrown into darkness. And not many people will be getting saved, I don't think. It's going to be just a time of brutal darkness and sadness. Many souls will be lost. So, but God knows what He's doing. It's part of God's plan. The devil doesn't win. It's insane that these people think they can defeat God. They've been deceived and duped into thinking that Lucifer is the equal of Yahweh. They've been tricked into thinking that Lucifer has equal power and that he's going to win in the end. So these people are blinded and deceived, thinking that with Lucifer they can have their debauched lifestyle and do whatever they want, and that's real freedom. And Yahweh's just restrictive with all these rules, and so they see Yahweh as the bad guy and Lucifer as the good guy. They're deceived. They don't understand the freedom and the righteousness and the joy and the peace that is in Christ, that sees wickedness as the death and destruction that it is. We see the poison in the fruit that the devil offers. They don't see the poison. They just see the pleasurable fruit. They're deceived and lost. And so we pray and we keep proclaiming the gospel. We keep reaching out. We keep telling the truth, understanding, counting the cost, knowing we're going to be hated and persecuted, but also understanding that it's through the message of the gospel that people can be awakened, even people involved in this deep level occultism. So there's real joy and hope in it. And that was a good ending to that last disc there. Can't wait to get into part 3. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. I love you, and Lord willing, we'll talk to you next time.